My name is Doug, 32 years old, and I had been making documentaries for nearly a decade when I finally got nominated for my first major award. After years of being the family disappointment, I thought this might be the moment they would finally show up for me. I messaged our family group chat about my award ceremony, only to have my brother Jake reply they were going to a concert instead. Mom added, "Do not guilt us." I just wrote back, "All right." What they saw on television that night changed everything. Before I tell you about that award night, drop a comment letting me know where you are watching from, and hit that subscribe button to hear more stories about standing up for yourself. Growing up in our suburban Boston home, I always felt like the odd one out. My younger brother Jake was the golden child, the star athlete who collected trophies like some kids collected comic books. Football in fall, basketball in winter, baseball in spring. Every season brought new victories, new celebrations, new photos on the mantle. Our refrigerator door disappeared beneath his newspaper clippings and award certificates. Meanwhile, my interest in filming and storytelling was treated like a quirky hobby at best, a waste of time at worst. My mother Susan was the family drill sergeant. She had a specific vision of success. Good grades, athletic achievement, prestigious, college conventional career path. Anything that deviated from that blueprint was met with a stern glance or cutting remark. "Filming birds in the backyard will not get you into college, Douglas," she would say whenever she caught me with my first hand-me-down camera. She worked as an accountant at a large firm and applied the same rigid structure to our home life that she did to her spreadsheets. Dad Tom was physically present but emotionally absent. His position as a sales executive for a pharmaceutical company meant frequent business trips and late nights at the office. When he was home, he mostly deferred to Mom on family matters. "Listen to. Your mother" became his default response to almost everything. I sometimes wondered if he even had opinions of his own. Jake was 3 years younger, but somehow always seemed to be looking down on me. By the time he was in middle school, he had already surpassed me in the family hierarchy. "Doug is just filming stuff again," he would announce at dinner when asked about my whereabouts, as if documenting life was somehow less valuable than throwing a ball through a hoop. My passion for filmmaking started when I was 11. Grandpa Mike gave me his old camcorder for my birthday. While my parents exchanged looks of disappointment at such an impractical gift, I felt like I had received the key to a whole new world. I spent that summer filming everything: bugs crawling across our patio, clouds drifting across the sky, neighbors walking their dogs, Jake practicing in the yard. I edited my first documentary about our neighborhood using 2 VCRs connected together, learning through trial and error. When I showed my family the finished product, Dad checked his watch every few minutes, Mom made polite but disinterested noises, and Jake openly laughed at my amateur transitions. Only Grandpa Mike seemed genuinely impressed. "You have got an eye, Doug," he told me later. "You see things others miss." His words became my lifeline during family gatherings where Jake's latest achievements dominated every conversation. High school widened the gap between my family's expectations and my aspirations. While Jake became team captain and prom king, I joined the AV club and saved up for better equipment by working weekends at the local electronics store. My grades were decent but not spectacular, especially in subjects that failed to capture my interest. This was another point of contention with Mom, who believed anything less than straight as was underachievement. The Franklin boys have always attended either Harvard or Yale. She reminded me during my junior year, referencing a family tradition that seemed to have skipped a generation with my parents, but was apparently back in full force with their expectations for their sons. I did not have the heart to tell her that film school was my dream, not an Ivy League education. The distance between us grew even wider when I announced my intention to study film at a state university rather than pursuing business or law at one of her preferred institutions. The argument that followed still rings in my ears sometimes. "You are throwing your life away on a hobby," Mom had said, her voice sharp with disappointment. "It is not a hobby. It is what I want to do with my life," I had insisted. "Nobody makes a living pointing cameras at things, Douglas. Thousands of people do exactly that, Mom." Dad had stood by the doorway silent as usual while Jake smirked from the couch. The battle lines were drawn that day, and they never really shifted. I chose my path despite their disapproval, working extra jobs to pay for the education they refused to fund after I rejected their chosen schools. Despite the growing rift, I still made efforts to maintain contact. Weekly phone calls home, even when they were painful exercises in small talk and deflection. Holiday visits where I sat through endless praise of Jake's accomplishments while my own progress went unmentioned. I sent birthday cards, remembered anniversaries, texted on special occasions. I kept hoping that one day they would see my persistence as proof that my different path did not make me any less dedicated or deserving of their support. After college, when I moved into a tiny apartment with 2 roommates and took on freelance editing gigs to make rent, I still called home every Sunday. When I got my first assistant producer credit on a small documentary, I sent them the link to watch it. Mom said she would try to find time to view it. Dad said good job without ever confirming whether he had seen it. Jake never responded at all. Years passed this way, with me extending bridges they rarely crossed. Their indifference hurt, but I had come to expect it. What I never stopped hoping for, though, was that someday I would create something that would finally make them understand why this path was worth taking. Something they could not ignore or dismiss. Something that would make them proud in spite of themselves. Little did I know that moment was finally approaching, but not in the way I had imagined it would unfold. Film school was both exhilarating and humbling. While my classmates discussed famous directors and obscure foreign films with casual expertise, I was still catching up on cinema history. Many came from artistic backgrounds or had parents who supported their creative ambitions. I came armed only with determination and the second-hand equipment I had managed to acquire over the years. I paid my tuition through a combination of student loans, part-time jobs, and the occasional freelance videography, gig filming weddings, or local business advertisements. My roommate often found me asleep at my desk head, resting on textbooks after late-night editing sessions. The summers between semesters were spent interning at production companies, mostly doing coffee runs and paperwork filing. While my former high school classmates posted photos of family vacations or graduation celebrations, I was learning how to properly coil cables and label footage. Mom occasionally called to ask if I was still doing the film thing, or to remind me that the business program at her alma mater accepted transfer students year-round. After graduation, I moved to New York with a film degree and boundless optimism that quickly collided with reality. The entry-level position I secured as a production assistant at a documentary company paid barely enough to share a cramped apartment in Queens with 3 other aspiring filmmakers. 14-hour days were standard, most of which involved tasks far removed from actual filmmaking. Arranging transportation, securing location permits, managing release forms, ordering meals for the crew. "This is paying your dues," my supervisor would say whenever I looked particularly exhausted. Everyone starts somewhere. 2 years into this grueling apprenticeship, I met Sarah Winters, an award-winning documentary filmmaker known for her unflinching portrayals of social issues. She was guest directing a project at our company, and I was assigned as her assistant. Most directors barely acknowledged the production assistants, but Sarah was different. She asked questions about my background, my aspirations, my point of view. "You have got to have something to say," she told me during a rare lunch break. Technical skills can be taught, but perspective comes from living. When she discovered I had been filming interviews with my building superintendent and other maintenance workers about their immigrant experiences, she asked to see the footage. What I had intended as practice material, she saw as the beginning of something meaningful. "Keep going with this," she encouraged. "These are voices we do not hear enough." Sarah became my mentor, offering guidance and occasionally bringing me onto her projects in more substantial roles than coffee fetcher. Under her tutelage, I began developing my own documentary style, intimate conversational, finding extraordinary stories in seemingly ordinary lives. The breakthrough came 3 years later when I was 28. A community center in the Bronx was being closed to make way for luxury apartments, displacing not only the center's programs but several homeless individuals who relied on its services. I began documenting the community's fight to save the space, initially just capturing footage on weekends and evenings after my regular job. As the story grew more complex, I took the biggest risk of my career. I quit my stable position to focus on the documentary full-time. My meager savings would cover about 3 months of expenses if I was extremely careful. Rachel, my girlfriend of 2 years, supported my decision, even though it meant I could no longer contribute much to our shared expenses. "This is what you have been working towards," she said. "I believe in you." Those words meant everything, especially coming from someone who knew the financial realities we faced. Rachel worked as a graphic designer and took on extra freelance projects to help us stay afloat while I pursued my film. She also designed the promotional materials and helped edit when my eyes were too exhausted to distinguish between cuts. The filming process was grueling. I followed community organizers to city council meetings, interviewed displaced individuals in temporary shelters, documented late-night strategy sessions, and early morning protests. Equipment malfunctioned, hard drives, crashed, interview subjects backed out at the last minute. There were days when nothing went right, when I questioned every choice that had led me to this precarious position. The lowest point came 6 months in, when my primary camera was stolen from my car, along with a week's worth of irreplaceable footage. I called Rachel from the parking lot, barely able to speak through my despair. "I cannot do this anymore," I told her. "I am not cut out for this." "Come home," she said simply. "We will figure it out together." That night, as I sat defeated on our couch, Rachel opened her laptop and showed me a crowdfunding page she had created without telling me. Friends, former colleagues, film school classmates, even some of the community members I had been documenting, had already pledged enough to replace the equipment and extend my filming timeline. The comments section was filled with messages of encouragement. "Your work matters. We need this story told. Do not give up." I wept openly, overwhelmed by the support network I had built without fully realizing it. The next morning I was back in the Bronx with a borrowed camera, more determined than ever. The documentary, which I titled Cornerstones, ultimately took 18 months to complete. It followed the community center's residents and advocates through their legal battles, temporary defeats, strategic pivots, and eventual partial victory in securing alternative space and services. More than just documenting a real estate dispute, it captured a community's resilience and the human cost of urban development. With Sarah's guidance, I submitted Cornerstones to several film festivals, expecting rejection but hoping for at least some constructive feedback. To my shock, it was accepted at 3, including the prestigious Urban Documentary Film Festival, known for launching careers and attracting industry attention. The festival screenings generated buzz beyond anything I had anticipated. Audience members approached me with tears in their eyes, sharing similar stories from their own communities. Film critics praised the documentary's intimate approach and unflinching honesty. A streaming service expressed interest in acquisition rights. Sarah called to tell me I had arrived. Then came the email I never expected to receive. Cornerstones had been nominated for the Impact Documentary Award, one of the most respected recognitions in the documentary world. Previous winners had gone on to Oscar nominations, major distribution deals, and the ability to fund future projects based on their name alone. I stared at the nomination email for nearly an hour before calling Rachel. "We did it," was all I could say when she answered. The ceremony was scheduled for the following month. As the date approached, I found myself thinking about my family more than I had expected to. Despite years of indifference, some childlike part of me still wanted them to witness this moment, to understand that the path they had dismissed had led somewhere meaningful after all. After a week of internal debate, I made the decision to reach out to them, to extend one more bridge across the chasm that had grown between us. Whether they crossed it or not would be their choice, but I needed to offer the opportunity. The morning I received the official nomination email, I was sitting in a cafe near our apartment, responding to festival inquiries, and planning the promotional strategy Sarah had advised me to develop. My phone pinged with a new message, the sender listed as Urban Documentary Awards Committee. My coffee grew cold as I read and reread the formal notification. "Dear Mr. Douglas Franklin, we are pleased to inform you that your film, Cornerstones, has been selected as a finalist for this year's Impact Documentary Award. Your compelling portrayal of community resilience in the face of displacement has deeply moved our selection committee." My hands trembled slightly as I called Rachel at work. "Can you talk?" I asked when she answered. "Hold on," she said, and I heard her footsteps as she moved to a quieter location. "What is up?" "I got nominated for the Impact Award." The words felt strange coming out of my mouth, as if I were reading someone else's script. Her scream of delight was so loud I had to pull the phone away from my ear. I knew it. I knew they would recognize how special your film is. She was crying, I realized. I am so proud of you, Doug. So incredibly proud. I could not have done it without you, I told her, meaning every word. We are celebrating tonight, she declared. I am leaving work early. This is huge, babe. This is everything you have worked for. After we hung up, I sat in the cafe for another hour watching people pass by outside the window, all going about their ordinary days while my life had just fundamentally shifted. The nomination alone would open doors that had previously been firmly closed to me. Then a different thought surfaced, one I had been trying to suppress. Would this finally be enough for my family to take my career seriously? 5 years had passed since my last visit home. Our communication had dwindled to obligatory holiday calls and the occasional text message. I still sent birthday cards and Christmas gifts more out of stubborn principle than any expectation of reciprocation. Mom had never visited my apartment in New York. Dad had been to the city twice for business, but claimed his schedule was too tight for even a quick coffee. Jake, now a successful physical therapist for a professional sports team, occasionally liked my social media posts, but rarely engaged beyond that superficial level. For days I debated whether to share the news with them. Rachel encouraged me to reach out. This is a big deal, Doug. Maybe they will finally see what I see in you. Sarah was more cautious. Set your expectations low, she advised. People do not change overnight, even when confronted with evidence that challenges their perspective. A week before the ceremony, I finally made my decision. The awards would be held on Friday evening at the Lincoln Center. Nominees were allowed to bring guests. I would invite my family and offer to arrange their transportation and accommodation. The ball would be in their court. I opened our family group chat, which had been inactive for months except for Mom's occasional forwards of health articles or Jake's photos from his team's victories. My thumbs hovered over the keyboard as I composed and deleted several drafts. How much detail should I include? How enthusiastic should I sound? How could I invite them without seeming like I was seeking validation? Finally, I typed, I have some news I wanted to share with you all. My documentary Cornerstones has been nominated for the Impact Documentary Award at the Urban Documentary Film Festival. The ceremony is this Friday evening at 7 p.m. at Lincoln Center. It would mean a lot to me if you could come. I can help arrange travel and hotel if needed. I pressed send before I could reconsider, then set my phone face down on the table and tried to focus on editing my acceptance speech just in case. 20 minutes passed before my phone buzzed. I took a deep breath before checking it. Jake had responded Friday night. Sorry, bro, we are all going to the Madison Square Garden concert. Taylor Swift tickets. Been planned for months. Congrats, though. My stomach tightened. Before I could respond, another message appeared. Mom, these tickets were very expensive and hard to get. Do not try to make us feel guilty. We are proud of you, but we cannot change our plans at the last minute. I waited for Dad to weigh in, but no further messages came through. Of course, he would not contradict Mom even in a text. The familiar ache of disappointment spread through my chest, but it was dulled by years of similar experiences. What had I expected? That a nomination would suddenly transform our family dynamic, that they would cancel their plans and rush to celebrate my achievement. Rachel found me still staring at my phone when she came home early, with champagne and takeout from our favorite restaurant. They are not coming, I said before she could ask. Her expression shifted from excitement to concern. What happened? I showed her the messages. Her face darkened as she read them. Concert tickets. Are you kidding me? And your mom. Do not try to make us feel guilty. You were not. You were just inviting them to something important. I shrugged, attempting nonchalance. It is fine. I did not really expect them to come. It is not fine, Rachel insisted. They should be thrilled for you. They should be canceling everything to be there. Well, they are not, I said, taking the champagne from her hands and searching for glasses. But you are here. Sarah will be there. My colleagues and friends will be there. The people who actually supported me through this journey will be in that room. Rachel watched me carefully. What are you going to reply? I picked up my phone and typed a single word. All right. Then I put my phone on silent, popped the champagne cork, and focused on celebrating with the person who had believed in me all along. The day of the ceremony arrived with a mix of spring rain and nervous anticipation. I woke early, unable to sleep past 5 a.m., my mind cycling through all the possible outcomes of the evening. Rachel found me at the kitchen table staring into a cold cup of coffee. Today is your day, she said, kissing the top of my head, no matter what happens with the award. She had taken the day off to help me prepare, understanding that my nerves would be stretched thin. We spent the morning finalizing my potential acceptance speech, though I remained convinced my nomination was recognition enough and winning was unlikely. At noon, a package arrived containing a tailored suit Rachel had secretly ordered weeks earlier. You cannot wear your interview suit to the biggest night of your career, she explained as I opened the box to find a perfectly fitted charcoal gray ensemble. How did you know my measurements? I asked, genuinely surprised by how well it fit when I tried it on. I measured your other clothes while you were sleeping, she admitted with a mischievous smile. I wanted you to look and feel your best tonight. As I stood before the mirror adjusting my tie, my phone rang. Sarah's name flashed on the screen. The nervous nominee answers, I said, attempting humor. How are you holding up, she asked. Alternating between excitement and terror, I admitted. That is the appropriate response, she laughed. Listen, I have been to dozens of these ceremonies, both as a nominee and as a winner. The secret is to remember that the nomination itself is the industry telling you that your voice matters. The actual trophy is just a bonus. I will try to remember that when I am hyperventilating in my seat. Your family coming tonight, she asked casually, though I suspected she already knew the answer. No, I said simply. Prior commitment. A brief silence followed before she spoke again. Their loss, Doug. Truly, their loss. After we hung up, I checked my phone one last time for any messages from my family. There were none. I placed the phone in my pocket and resolved not to check it again until after the ceremony. The Lincoln Center glowed against the darkening sky as our taxi approached. A modest red carpet had been set up for the documentary community. Certainly nothing like the Oscars, but impressive nonetheless for someone who had spent years working in obscurity. Photographers captured images of arriving filmmakers, and a small group of documentary enthusiasts cheered as each nominee was announced. Douglas Franklin, director of Cornerstones, called the event coordinator as we approached. A smattering of applause followed along with a few enthusiastic cheers from the small crowd. I recognized several voices of community members from my documentary who had been invited as special guests. Inside the venue was transformed into an elegant celebration of documentary filmmaking. Posters of the nominated films lined the walls, including a striking image from Cornerstones showing Miss Diaz, the 70-year-old community organizer, who had become the heart of my film, standing defiantly before the community center with her arms crossed. We found our assigned table near the front where Sarah was already seated with her husband and several other industry figures I recognized but had never met. Introductions were made, hands were shaken, business cards were exchanged. Everyone was gracious, treating me like a peer rather than an outsider who had somehow slipped through the velvet rope. Your film moved me to tears, said Elaine Winters, a legendary producer whose documentaries had shaped the genre. The scene where Mr. Vasquez returns to find his belongings removed from the center. I have not stopped thinking about it. Before I could properly process receiving such praise from someone I had studied in film school, the lights dimmed and the ceremony began. The host, a respected documentary filmmaker himself, took the stage with warmth and humor, celebrating the power of true stories to change hearts and minds. Several awards were presented before they reached the Impact Documentary category. Each win was celebrated with genuine enthusiasm by the room, a community united by purpose rather than divided by competition. I applauded sincerely for each recipient already feeling victorious, simply by being included in their company. And now the host announced the nominees for the Impact Documentary Award, celebrating films that not only document social issues but inspire meaningful action. A screen descended showing clips from each nominated film. When scenes from Cornerstones appeared featuring the community's protest at City Hall and the emotional testimony of residents, a hush fell over the room, followed by appreciative murmurs. Rachel squeezed my hand so tightly it nearly went numb. And the Impact Documentary Award goes to... The host opened the envelope with deliberate slowness that seemed designed to induce cardiac arrest. Cornerstones, directed by Douglas Franklin. The room erupted in applause. Rachel screamed and threw her arms around me. Sarah pounded the table in celebration. I sat frozen, certain I had misheard. "Go," Rachel urged, pushing me gently. "Go get your award." The walk to the stage passed in a blur. Hands reached out to pat my back as I moved through the tables. The host smiled broadly as he handed me the substantial glass trophy, shaped like a ripple in water, symbolizing the impact of storytelling. Standing at the microphone, looking out at a room full of my peers and heroes, I suddenly remembered I had prepared a speech. My hands trembled slightly as I unfolded the paper from my pocket. When I began filming Cornerstones, I was just one person with a camera trying to capture a story I felt needed to be told. I began my voice steadier than I expected. I had no budget, no crew, just a conviction that these voices mattered. I spoke about the community members who had trusted me with their stories, about the importance of documenting the human cost of urban development, about the resilience I had witnessed in the face of seemingly insurmountable obstacles. "This film exists because people believed in it when there was no logical reason to do so," I continued. My mentor Sarah Winters, who taught me that technical skill means nothing without empathy and purpose. The subjects of this documentary who opened their lives to my camera during their most vulnerable moments, and my partner Rachel, who supported me financially and emotionally when this project consumed everything we had. I paused, suddenly aware that I had not mentioned my family. In my prepared remarks, I had included a brief acknowledgement of them, a small olive branch extended despite their absence. But standing there, trophy in hand, I realized I did not need to pretend anymore. To anyone watching who has ever been told their passion is impractical, that their vision does not matter, that their voice is not worth hearing, let this be evidence to the contrary. The path might be longer and harder than you imagined, but your stories deserve to be told. Thank you for this tremendous honor. The applause as I left the stage seemed to confirm that I had said something that resonated. Back at our table, Sarah embraced me with tears in her eyes. "Perfect speech," she whispered. "Absolutely perfect." The remainder of the ceremony passed in a happy daze. When it concluded, we moved to the reception area, where I was immediately surrounded by well-wishers and industry figures interested in discussing my next project. Business cards accumulated in my pocket, along with promises of coffee meetings and potential funding conversations. A reporter from a prominent film publication approached with a photographer. "Mr. Franklin, would you mind answering a few questions about your win tonight? We are covering the ceremony for our live broadcast and website." Only then did it register that parts of the ceremony, including the major award presentations, had been broadcast live on the festival's streaming channel and a regional television network. I had been so focused on the room that I had forgotten about the cameras. Of course, I agreed, still somewhat dazed by the evening's turn of events. The interview was brief but thoughtful, focused on the social issues highlighted in my documentary rather than the typical "how does it feel to win" questions. When it concluded, the reporter thanked me and added, "Your speech was quite moving. Very honest about the support system that makes creative work possible." I thanked her and rejoined Rachel, who was chatting with Sarah and some other filmmakers. The night continued with celebrations, connections, and continuous congratulations. Not once did I check my phone or think about the concert my family had prioritized over this milestone in my life. It was nearly 2 a.m. when Rachel and I finally returned to our apartment, both exhausted but exhilarated. The trophy sat on our coffee table, catching the light from our single lamp. "I still cannot believe it," I said, loosening my tie. Rachel kicked off her heels and collapsed onto the couch. "I can. Your film was the best one nominated. Everyone saw what I have always seen in you." Only then, in the quiet of our apartment, did I finally check my phone. The screen was filled with notifications, congratulatory texts from friends and former colleagues, emails from industry contacts, social media alerts, and 3 messages from my family group chat. Jake timestamped 9:47 p.m. Just saw you on television receiving an award. Why did not you tell us it was such a big deal? Mom 9:52 p.m. Douglas, call us when you get this. We had no idea your film was being recognized at this level. Dad 10:15 p.m. Son, congratulations on your achievement. We are very proud. Please call when you can. I showed the messages to Rachel, who read them with an increasingly incredulous expression. Now they care. Now they are proud. After you explicitly told them how important it was, and they chose a concert instead. I set the phone down without replying. Let us talk about it tomorrow. Tonight is for celebrating what we accomplished together. Rachel softened, curling against me on the couch. You are right. This is your moment, and nothing can take that away. As we sat together in the gentle quiet of early morning, the trophy gleaming before us, I felt a complex mixture of emotions: triumph, vindication, lingering hurt, but above all a profound sense of having finally found my place in the world with or without my family's approval. My phone began ringing at 7:30 a.m. the next morning. After the late-night celebration, Rachel and I had planned to sleep in, but the persistent buzzing eventually penetrated my exhausted slumber. Still half asleep, I fumbled for the device on the nightstand. Hello, I mumbled, not checking the caller ID. Douglas. It is Mom. I sat up immediately, suddenly wide awake. Rachel stirred beside me, opening one eye questioningly. Hi, Mom, I said, my voice carefully neutral. We saw you on television last night, she said, sounding unusually animated, at the award ceremony. You won. Yes, I did, I replied simply. Why did not you tell us it was such an important award? We had no idea. The newspaper this morning called it the documentary world's highest honor for social impact films. I pressed my fingers against the bridge of my nose, feeling a headache beginning to form. I did tell you. I said I was nominated for the Impact Documentary Award. Well, yes, but you did not explain what that meant, she countered. We thought it was just some small festival thing. Rachel, now fully awake and listening to my side of the conversation, raised her eyebrows in disbelief. I invited you to the ceremony, I reminded her. I said it would mean a lot if you could come. If we had known it was this significant, of course we would have come. Mom insisted. Jake could have sold the concert tickets. The irony was almost too much to bear. I took a deep breath before responding. What do you need, Mom? Her tone shifted slightly. We want to see you, Douglas. Your father, Jake, and I. We want to celebrate your achievement. Can you come home for dinner this weekend, Saturday night? My immediate instinct was to decline to protect myself from another disappointment. But a smaller, persistent voice reminded me that this might be the opportunity I had wanted for years, the chance to finally have my family acknowledge my path. I will have to check my schedule, I said non-committally. Things are pretty busy right now with post-award interviews and meetings. Of course, she said quickly. You must be in demand now. But do try to make time for family, Douglas. We are very proud of you. Those words, which I had longed to hear for over a decade now, rang hollow. Where was this pride when I was struggling to complete the film? Where was this interest when I invited them to share in this moment? I will let you know, I said finally. I need to go now. I have a meeting soon. The lie came easily, a small shield against the complicated emotions this conversation was stirring up. After hanging up, I relayed the conversation to Rachel, who listened with growing indignation. They thought it was some small festival thing. Are you kidding me? You specifically said it was an important award. I know, I sighed, falling back against the pillows. And now they want to celebrate with you. After they could not be bothered to show up. Apparently. Rachel studied my face carefully. You are considering going, are not you? I nodded slowly. Maybe this is the breakthrough I've been waiting for. Maybe seeing me on television, hearing other people validate my work finally made them understand. She took my hand, her expression softening. I support whatever you decide. But please, be careful with your expectations. I do not want to see you hurt again. Over the next few days, my life transformed in ways I could hardly have imagined. The award generated immediate professional opportunities, a streaming service offering distribution for Cornerstone's production companies, inquiring about my next project, film schools asking me to speak to their students. Sarah helped me navigate these new waters, advising on which opportunities to pursue and which to politely decline. Meanwhile, the messages from my family continued. Jake sent a text saying he had watched my documentary online and thought it was actually really good. Dad called to ask about the production process, showing more interest in my work than he had in the entire decade I had been pursuing filmmaking. Mom sent daily updates about neighbors and relatives who had seen the news of my win. By Thursday, I had made my decision. I would go to dinner at their house on Saturday. Rachel offered to come with me for moral support, but I felt this was something I needed to do alone. Are you sure? She asked, as I packed an overnight bag on Saturday morning. Your family has a way of making you feel small. I hate the thought of you facing that by yourself. I will be fine, I assured her, though uncertainty churned in my stomach. This time is different. I am different. The train ride from New York to Boston gave me time to prepare mentally. I reminded myself of what I had accomplished, of the validation I had received from people whose opinions actually mattered in my field. I was no longer the family disappointment desperately seeking approval. I was an award-winning filmmaker whose work had been recognized for its social significance. Dad picked me up at the station, greeting me with an awkward hug that felt foreign after years of minimal physical contact. Good to see you, son, he said, taking my bag. Everyone is excited you are coming. The house looked exactly as I remembered, frozen in time like a museum exhibit of my childhood. Same furniture, same family photos on the walls, most featuring Jake in various athletic uniforms. I noticed a few newer photos had been added. Jake at his physical therapy practice, Jake with his college teammates at a reunion, Jake receiving an award from his current employer. Mom rushed to greet me in the entryway, embracing me with unusual enthusiasm. Douglas, we are so happy you could make it. Jake emerged from the kitchen, a beer in hand. The award-winning filmmaker returns, he said, with a grin that did not quite reach his eyes. Dinner was a strange experience, surreal in its performative normalcy. Mom had prepared all my childhood favorites, dishes she had not bothered to make during my infrequent visits over the past decade. The conversation remained superficial, at first focused on safe topics like the weather, local news, and distant relatives. Eventually, as dessert was served, Mom broached the subject of my career. We watched your documentary yesterday, she announced. Very impressive. Those poor people losing their community center like that. Did you understand what they were fighting for? I asked, curious if they had absorbed the actual message of the film. Well, they wanted to keep their building, Dad offered. It was about more than the building, I explained. It was about community identity, about having a voice in decisions that affect your neighborhood, about resistance to systematic displacement. The camera work was very nice, Mom said, clearly uncomfortable with the political undertones. And you interviewed so many different people. Did you bring the award with you? Jake asked suddenly. I want to see it. No, I left it at home. You should have brought it, Mom said, a hint of disappointment in her voice. We could have put it on the mantle for a while. I glanced at the mantle crowded with Jake's trophies and team photos. It is not really a traveling trophy, I said. Well, next time you visit, bring it along, she insisted. We would love to show it to the neighbors. Mrs. Prescott's son works in television, you know. Not films, but still entertainment. She was very impressed when I told her about your award. Something in her tone set off warning bells. This felt less like genuine pride in my accomplishment, and more like excitement about having bragging rights in the neighborhood. So what happens now? Dad asked. Do you get more money for your films? Better jobs? It definitely opens doors, I acknowledged. I have meetings next week with some production companies interested in funding my next project. What is that worth financially? Jake pressed. These film deals. It varies widely, I said, increasingly uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. But yes, there is potential for significant improvement in my financial situation. Mom brightened visibly. That is wonderful news. Maybe you can finally move out of that tiny apartment Rachel mentioned. Perhaps even look at buying a house in a good neighborhood. I like my apartment, I said. And my neighborhood. But surely now you can afford something better, she persisted. Mom's success in documentary filmmaking is not measured by the size of your house. She waved her hand dismissively. Of course. But financial security is important too. Oh, speaking of your award, would you be able to loan it to us for the charity auction at the country club next month? Mrs. Winterbourne is chairing the committee, and when I mentioned your win, she thought displaying an actual film award would be quite the attraction. I stared at her momentarily, speechless. You want to use my award as a decoration at a country club auction? Just for the evening, she said, seemingly oblivious to my incredulity. It would be returned safely, of course. No, I said firmly. Absolutely not. There is no need to be selfish, Douglas, Mom replied, her smile tightening. It would just be for one night, and it would help raise money for a good cause. It is not about being selfish. That award represents years of work, sacrifice, and dedication to a project no one in this room supported or even acknowledged until it won a prize. A tense silence fell over the table. Dad studied his coffee, intently avoiding eye contact. Jake leaned back in his chair, a faint smirk playing at the corners of his mouth. Well, Mom, finally said, her voice brittle, I see success has not improved your attitude. The dam broke. Years of suppressed frustration and hurt surged forward, impossible to contain any longer. My attitude, I repeated incredulously. I invited you to the most important night of my career, and you chose a concert instead. You did not even bother to ask what the award meant before declining. Then you saw me on television, realized other people valued my work, and suddenly, you are interested. Not in the film itself, not in what it represents or the issues it addresses, but in how you can use my achievement to impress your friends at the country club. Mom's face flushed. That is completely unfair. We had no idea the award was so prestigious. You never asked, I countered. You never showed any interest in understanding my work. For 10 years, I have sent you links to my films, invited you to screenings, tried to share this part of my life with you. And you have consistently treated it as a hobby I would eventually outgrow. We were concerned about your financial stability. Dad interjected weakly. Creative careers are risky. So is playing professional sports, I pointed out, but you never discouraged Jake from pursuing athletics. You celebrated every game, every trophy, every achievement. Meanwhile, you treated my passion as an embarrassment. Jake shifted uncomfortably. Come on, Doug. They came to my games because they were local. Your film stuff was always in New York. Or wherever. I have had screenings in Boston, I reminded him. None of you came. We are trying now, Mom said, her voice rising. We are acknowledging your success now. Why can you not appreciate that? Instead of dwelling on the past. Because nothing has actually changed, I realized aloud. You are not proud of me. Or my work. You are proud that other people think my work is valuable. There is a difference. The truth of this statement hung in the air between us. No one rushed to deny it. I think I should go, I said quietly, pushing back from the table. Do not be dramatic, Douglas, Mom snapped. You just got here. I am not being dramatic. I am being honest, probably for the first time in this house. I stood up suddenly, certain of my decision. Thank you for dinner. I will get a hotel for tonight and take the train back tomorrow. As I headed toward the door to retrieve my bag, I heard Dad's chair scrape against the floor as he stood up. Wait, he said, his voice stronger than I had heard it in years. I turned around, one hand already on the doorknob, expecting another half-hearted attempt to smooth things over without addressing the actual issues. Instead, I found my father standing tall, his expression pained but resolute. Doug is right, he said, turning to face my mother and Jake. We have failed him consistently for years, and we are still failing him now. Mom stared at Dad with naked shock. Thomas, what are you talking about? When was the last time any of us asked Doug about his films because we were genuinely interested, not just making polite conversation, Dad asked. When did we ever treat his passion with the same respect we gave to Jake's sports career? That is different, Mom protested. Jake was winning championships. And Doug just won the equivalent of a championship in his field, Dad countered. But we were not there to see it because we prioritized a concert over one of the most important moments of his life. Jake looked down at his plate, avoiding eye contact with anyone. We did not know it was important, Mom repeated, but her voice had lost some of its conviction. We did not try to know, Dad said quietly. We never tried to understand what mattered to Doug. I never tried. He turned to me, his eyes unexpectedly bright, with unshed tears. I cannot remember the last time I asked you a meaningful question about your work, your passion. I defaulted to your mother's judgment that it was an impractical phase, and I failed to support you as a father should. I am deeply sorry for that, son. The sincerity in his voice caught me off guard. In 32 years, I had never heard my father speak with such emotional honesty. I remained by the door, uncertain how to respond to this unprecedented vulnerability. You have every right to walk out that door, Dad continued. But if you are willing, I would like a chance to do better. To actually listen and understand your work, not because it won an award, but because it matters to you. A heavy silence filled the room. Mom looked bewildered by this turn of events, while Jake shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Why now? I finally asked. What changed? Dad gestured toward the living room. Can we sit down, all of us? After a moment's hesitation, I nodded and followed him. We arranged ourselves awkwardly in the living room, the tension palpable. I have been doing a lot of thinking since we saw you on television, Dad began. Not just about the award, but about the speech you gave. You talked about everyone who supported you. Jake interjected. Your mentor. Your girlfriend. Even the people in your documentary. But you never mentioned us. Because you were not there, I said simply. We should have been, Dad acknowledged. And that night, watching you accept that award without us, I realized how many other important moments we have missed, because we were too stubborn or too blind to recognize your path as valid. Mom crossed her arms defensively. We were trying to guide you toward stability and security. That is what parents do. No, Susan, Dad said firmly. We were trying to force Doug into a mold that fit our expectations, not his talents or passions. And in doing so, we pushed him away. Jake cleared his throat. For what it is worth, I watched your documentary last night. The whole thing, not just skimming through. It was powerful. That old woman, the community organizer. Miss Diaz-Schuplaid. Yeah, her. The way she talked about fighting for spaces where people could belong, where they mattered, it made me think about some things. Like what I asked, genuinely curious about his take. Jake hesitated, seeming to choose his words carefully. Like how maybe I have been kind of a jerk about your career. I never really tried to understand what you were doing because I was too busy enjoying being the favorite. Mom made a sound of protest, but Jake held up his hand. Come on, Mom. We all know it is true. Doug was pursuing something different. Something you guys did not value. And I benefited from that. Got all the attention, all the praise, all the support. We supported both of you, Mom insisted. Did we though? Dad asked gently. Did we attend Doug's film school graduation with the same enthusiasm we showed at Jake's college games? Did we ever offer to help him financially when he was struggling to complete his projects, the way we helped Jake with the down payment on his condo? Mom's lips pressed into a thin line, but she did not respond. I think Dad continued that we owe Doug more than a congratulatory dinner. We owe him an honest acknowledgement of how we have treated him and his passion over the years. And what good will that do? Mom asked sharply, dwelling on past mistakes. It is not about dwelling, I explained, finding my voice. It is about recognition. You cannot build a new relationship on a foundation of denial. I am not in denial, Mom said. I just do not see the point in rehashing old grievances. They are not old if they are still happening, I pointed out. Even tonight your interest was not in my work itself, but in how you could use my award to impress your friends. Mom flinched slightly, perhaps recognizing the truth in my words. She was quiet for a long moment before speaking again, her voice softer than before. I do not understand your films, Douglas. I do not understand why you would choose such an uncertain path when you could have had stability and security. It frightened me to see you struggling financially, living in tiny apartments, working odd jobs to support what seemed like a pipe dream. I wanted better for you. Did you ever consider that my definition of better might be different from yours, I asked. That for me, creative fulfillment and meaningful work might be more important than a big house or a prestigious job title. I suppose I did not, she admitted reluctantly. I was so certain I knew what was best. Jake leaned forward. Do you think you could show us your documentary? Like right now. The whole thing with you explaining parts. If we have questions. The request surprised me. You want to watch it now? Yeah, he nodded. I mean, if we are trying to understand you better, maybe actually seeing your work with you here to talk about it would help. I looked at my parents. Dad nodded encouragingly while Mom hesitated before giving a small nod of her own. I have it on my laptop, I said. We could connect it to the television. For the next 90 minutes, my family watched Cornerstones in complete silence. I occasionally paused to explain certain choices, technical decisions, background on particular subjects, challenges we had faced during filming. To my surprise, they asked thoughtful questions. Dad wanted to know about the legal battles the community had faced. Mom was curious about how I had gained the trust of the residents. Jake asked about the emotional toll of documenting people in crisis. When the credits rolled, no one spoke immediately. Dad wiped his eyes discreetly, and even Mom looked affected. That was remarkable, Doug, Dad finally said. The way you captured the humanity of everyone involved, even the developers. You showed the complexity without simplifying or vilifying anyone. Miss Diaz reminds me of Grandma, Mom said quietly. Same determination. Is this what all your films are like? Jake asked. Showing real people dealing with real problems? I nodded. I am interested in stories that might otherwise go untold. Perspectives that do not usually get airtime in mainstream media. I see why you won the award, Dad said. This is important work. It matters, I agreed. Maybe not in the way a medical breakthrough matters or the way Jake's work helping athletes recover from injuries matters, but it matters in its own way. Mom reached out hesitantly and patted my hand, a gesture so unfamiliar, it momentarily startled me. I may not have understood your path, Douglas, but I can see now that you have found something meaningful, something that uses your unique perspective and talents. It was not a full transformation. Decades of misunderstanding and hurt could not be erased in a single evening, but it was a beginning, a small crack in the wall that had stood between us for so long. I should go, I said, glancing at my watch. It is getting late, and I told Rachel I would call her tonight. Stay, Dad suggested. Your old room is still there. We could talk more tomorrow, maybe look at some of your other work if you are willing to share it. I considered the offer. Part of me wanted to maintain the distance that had protected me from their indifference for so many years. But another part recognized the genuine effort being made, particularly by my father. All right, I agreed cautiously. I will stay tonight. As I headed upstairs to my old bedroom, Jake followed me into the hallway. Hey, he said awkwardly. I have been thinking about something. I have always assumed my career path was my own choice, but now I am wondering how much of it was about living up to Mom and Dad's expectations. What do you mean? I mean, I like my job, but sometimes I wonder if I pursued sports and physical therapy because I truly loved it, or because it was the path of least resistance, the path that got me praise and support. I had never considered that Jake might have his own complicated relationship with our parents' expectations. Do you enjoy what you do now? I asked. He shrugged. Most days. But watching your film tonight, seeing how passionate you are about your work, I am not sure I have ever felt that strongly about anything. It is never too late to explore other interests, I suggested. Maybe he nodded thoughtfully. Would you be willing to talk more about how you figured out what you really wanted to do? Not tonight, but sometime. Sure, I agreed, surprised but pleased by the request. Anytime. As I settled into my childhood bed that night, surrounded by the remnants of my youth, I called Rachel to update her on the unexpected turn of events. So they actually watched your film, she asked, sounding impressed, and had real questions about it. It was surreal, I admitted. Especially Dad. I have never seen him stand up to Mom like that before. Do you think anything will really change? I do not know, I said honestly. This could be a momentary reaction that fades when the novelty wears off. Or it could be the beginning of something different. Either way, I feel lighter somehow. Like I finally said things I have been holding back for years. I am proud of you, Rachel said softly, for standing your ground and for being open to their efforts however belated they might be. As I drifted towards sleep, I reflected on the strange journey that had brought me to this point. The award had been a catalyst, but the real breakthrough had come from finding the courage to speak my truth, to stop pretending that their indifference did not hurt, to demand the recognition, not just of my success, but of my right to choose my own path. It was too soon to know if this night would mark a permanent shift in our family dynamic. But for the first time in years, I felt a cautious hope that maybe, just maybe, we might find a way to build something new from the ruins of what had been broken for so long. 6 months passed, bringing changes I could never have anticipated that night at the family dinner table. The immediate aftermath of my award win had opened professional doors, leading to a distribution deal for Cornerstones and funding for my next documentary project. But the more surprising developments had occurred within my family relationships, evolving in ways both challenging and rewarding. My father had embraced his newfound voice, becoming my most consistent family supporter. He had visited New York 3 times, once with Mom and twice on his own. During those solo visits, we had conversations unlike any we had shared before, gradually filling in the vast, empty spaces of our knowledge about each other. I learned about his own abandoned creative aspirations, how he had once dreamed of being a writer before practical concerns and family expectations had steered him toward business. He in turn asked thoughtful questions about my work, consuming my earlier films with genuine interest, and offering perspectives that, while sometimes naive about filmmaking, showed a sincere desire to understand. I always thought artists were born, not made, he told me during his last visit as we walked through Central Park on a crisp autumn afternoon. That creativity was some innate gift that you either had or did not have. I never understood the discipline and craftsmanship involved, the thousands of hours of practice and refinement. Watching you work during my visits has been eye-opening. Mom's journey had been more complicated. Her initial resistance had gradually softened, though she still occasionally made comments that revealed her lingering belief that conventional success metrics were the only valid ones. Yet there were moments of genuine connection too, like when she called specifically to discuss a scene in Cornerstones that had reminded her of her own mother's activism in their church community. I never made the connection before, she admitted, but Grandma was fighting for what she believed in, just like the people in your film. I always admired her for that strength. I suppose I should have recognized that same quality in you. The most unexpected transformation had been Jake's. Our conversation that night had apparently catalyzed a period of serious self-reflection for him. 2 months after my visit, he had called to tell me he was reducing his hours at the sports clinic to pursue a long-suppressed interest in coaching underprivileged youth. I realized I had been chasing external validation my whole life, he explained. Always looking for the next trophy, the next accomplishment I could show off. But watching those people in your documentary fight for something bigger than themselves, it made me question what I am really contributing. His new program, which provided free physical therapy and athletic training to kids who could not afford sports equipment or league fees, had given him a sense of purpose I had never heard in his voice before. We had started talking regularly, our conversations evolving from awkward small talk to meaningful exchanges about our respective work and lives. My newest documentary project had become unexpectedly a family affair in small ways. Dad had helped secure permission to film at several locations through his business connections. Mom had surprised me by offering to help with some of the budget planning, putting her accounting skills to use in service of art, rather than commerce. Jake had introduced me to some of his program participants, teenagers whose perspectives on community sports programs added valuable dimension to the story I was telling. Rachel had watched this evolution with cautious optimism, protective of my emotional well-being but supportive of the healing process. Just remember, she reminded me regularly, reconciliation does not mean erasing the past or pretending the hurt never happened. It means building something new with clear eyes about what came before. I had taken her wisdom to heart, maintaining healthy boundaries, even as I opened myself to these new relationships. I no longer sought their approval with the desperate hunger of my younger self. Instead, I welcomed their interest and support as a bonus, not a necessity, secure in the knowledge that my worth as a filmmaker and as a person did not depend on their validation. On a Sunday afternoon in late October, we gathered in a small theater in Boston for a special screening of Cornerstones, followed by a Q&A session I had been invited to conduct. As I stood at the podium, I spotted my family in the third row, Rachel beside them, all listening attentively, as I explained the film's journey from concept to completion. During the question period, a film student asked about the most important lesson I had learned through making documentaries. Without hesitation, I found myself speaking from a place of hard-won wisdom. The most profound thing I have learned is that your value is not determined by external validation, I said. For years, I chased approval from people who were fundamentally incapable of giving it, not because they did not love me, but because they could not see the worth in what I was pursuing. I thought if I just achieved enough, won enough awards, gained enough recognition, they would finally understand and support my path. I glanced at my family, who were listening intently. But that was backward thinking. No achievement, no award, no external validation can fill the hole left by believing you need permission to pursue your passion. The turning point came not when I won an award, but when I finally stood up for myself and my work. When I stopped accepting the narrative that my path was less valid than more conventional routes. The truth is, we all want to be seen and understood by the people we care about. That desire is natural and human. But making your self-worth dependent on that understanding is a recipe for suffering. The real liberation comes from recognizing your own value, from pursuing what matters to you with integrity and purpose, regardless of whether the people around you comprehend its worth. After the event, as we walked to a nearby restaurant for dinner, Dad squeezed my shoulder. "That was powerful stuff about validation," he said. "Hit pretty close to home for all of us, I think." Including me, I acknowledged. I am still learning it myself. That evening, surrounded by my family and Rachel, I reflected on the strange, winding path that had brought us to this moment. The hurt had not vanished. There were still awkward pauses and occasional missteps as we navigated this evolving relationship. But there was also genuine connection, moments of understanding that would have seemed impossible a year earlier. The award that had initially seemed like it would be the pinnacle of my professional life had ultimately mattered more as a catalyst for personal growth than for the career opportunities it created. It had forced a confrontation that, while painful, had been necessary to break the cycle of seeking approval I could never earn on their terms. The most valuable trophy was not the glass ripple sitting on my shelf at home, but the freedom I had found in standing firm in my own worth, in asserting the validity of my chosen path without needing their endorsement to justify it. That liberation had ironically created space for a relationship based on mutual respect rather than conditional approval. As I look back on that journey now, I understand that sometimes the bravest thing we can do is to stop accommodating the narratives others have created about us, to refuse to make ourselves smaller to fit into the boxes they have constructed. Sometimes healing begins not with forgiveness, but with the courage to say, "This is who I am. This is what matters to me. This is the life I have chosen, and it is worthy of respect." The path to authenticity is rarely smooth, and standing in your truth can be profoundly uncomfortable, especially with those who have known you longest. But I have found that genuine connection can only begin when we stop performing versions of ourselves designed to please others and start showing up as who we really are, with all our inconvenient passions and divergent dreams. If you are struggling with similar family dynamics or feeling pressure to abandon your authentic path for one that would earn more approval, know that the validation you seek externally can only truly be found within. Your worth is not determined by others' ability to recognize it. The very passion that some may dismiss as impractical might be your greatest gift to the world. Have you ever had to stand up for your choices when those closest to you could not see their value? Share your experience in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that their path is valid, even when others cannot see it. Thank you for listening to my journey. And remember, the most powerful validation comes not from accolades or approval, but from the quiet certainty that you are living in alignment with your own truth.